What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Fish the Moment. Today we're going to be doing a 3-hour challenge video on Table Rock Lake in Missouri. And we've had a lot of really cold weather the last few days. It is 30 degrees right now at 9 o'clock. And so definitely a chilly morning. I think the fish are starting to transition to their fall patterns and even into some of their winter patterns. And so it should be a pretty interesting day. I'm going to spend an hour looking around the lake, graphing, looking at some of the banks, things like that, as I always do. I'll tell you how that goes after I'm done. And then we're going to start the 3-hour challenge. I'll talk about baits, areas, show you sonar recordings, everything like that. And the goal is to get 5 bass in the boat in 3 hours. So let's see if I can do it. Okay guys, so I graphed around for about an hour. I graphed up shallow, graphed out deep, and I actually found 3 big schools of fish offshore, about 35 to 40 feet of water, suspended in some deep trees. And I actually just graphed over them and they're still here. So I'm gonna start off by throwing a hair jig down on them. And then after that, I'm actually going to drop a drop shot down there. Hopefully we can get a limit here pretty quick off this spot, or the next couple spots even, and then maybe go for some bigger fish also. So let's get after it. So the spot I'm starting on is a main lake point that sticks really far out into the lake. And the top of the point is in 25 to 40 feet of water, and it drops off on both sides into 60 and 70 feet. And up on top of the point, we have some deep trees. They're about 15 to 20 feet tall. And when I graphed over this point, you can actually see the trees really clearly on my down imaging. And most of the time when you graph over trees, they're gonna be pretty much empty, no fish, no bait around them. But every once in a while, you'll find a tree that looks like this one. And you can actually see a lot of bright dots all around this tree. And it almost looks like a Christmas tree that's lit up with lights. And the way I actually got this image is to turn the sensitivity on my Fishfinder down. And what that'll do is it'll make these dots on the screen pop. And the trees will become a little bit more translucent. And that's because the fish actually are harder than these old trees they're standing in the lake, which will give them a stronger return. And I plan on making a video about this in the near future about how to adjust your sensitivity on your graph depending on what type of structure you're graphing. And I also want to do a video on how to actually graph deep trees. So I'll save the specific details for that video. And if you do want to figure out more about how to identify fish in your Fishfinder, check out this video up here in the right corner. But let's get out in the lake now and actually try to catch some of these fish. So after graphing over the spot and seeing all those fish suspended in that tree, I decided to throw a hair jig on there. And I get a lot of questions all the time from guys asking me, how long should I stay on an offshore area? And what I find is that when people see an awesome image on their Fishfinder, where you have a tree with maybe 15 or 20 fish in it, they might spend 30 minutes, an hour, maybe an hour and a half trying to fish that tree and force those fish to bite. But what I find is that most of the time when I'm fishing offshore, I get bit within my first 5 casts. And if you take a look at me fishing here, I'm making a couple casts through here, I'm putting the cast count on the screen, and on my 5th cast, I actually get a bite on the hair jig. And it was a pretty good bite, but he didn't commit to it. And then I got another bite on that hair jig, and again, didn't get the bass to commit on it. And so usually when the fish are going to feed, when they're actively feeding, they're gonna bite within your first 5 to 10 casts. You don't need to stay there for an hour or 2 hours if you don't get a bite. But then if you do get a bite, I do like to stay for about an extra 10 minutes, try to fish a couple different baits, a swim bait, a drop shot, or depending on where you're fishing, a different type of bait. And if I don't get bit within 10 minutes of getting a bite on that spot, I'm gonna move on. And usually if I don't get a fish off a spot within 10 minutes of being there, I also move on. And it doesn't mean I'm leaving the spot entirely. What it means is I'm going to come back and refish this area maybe 2, 3, 4 times throughout the day. Because I know those fish are there, but I want to make sure that I am trying to find active groups of fish that are feeding. And I have 3 or 4 other spots found, so I'm not gonna waste my whole day on one spot. I'm gonna rotate 5 or 6 spots and wait until those fish are really aggressive and they eat my bait like first or second cast. So I didn't catch any fish off this point despite getting 2 bites on the hair jig and throwing a few other baits. And so I decided to move to another main lake point where I saw some nice fish stacked up in a brush pile. And this point right here is another main lake point. Top of the point is about 10 feet of water and it drops off into 60 and 70 feet of water. And on top of this point, there was a nice brush pile. And as I graphed over it, you can see that this brush pile here is loaded up with fish. And I was really excited when I saw this spot. I wanted to stop and fish right away, but I knew I had to find some more spots to keep graphing. And so I decided to start off by throwing a football jig down there in the brush pile. Didn't get any takers. Then I went to something a little more finessey, a little swim bait. And here's what happened. Got him. There we go. That feels like a good one too. Oh yeah, nice one. That's what I'm talking about, making adjustments and putting some fish in the boat. That's my second bite on this cast too. That fish choked that thing. Oh, that's a nice spotted bass too. Wow, there we go. Number one right there. Guys, I was struggling here for the first about 30 minutes of this challenge. I was seeing fish all over the graph, and I actually got one good bite on that hair jig like I mentioned, and wow, look how that fish ate that bait. Switched up to a lot more finessey approach. You can see it's dead calm out here, no wind. Let me get this guy on hook real quick. Oh, there we go, nice fish. But what I did is actually switched up to a Megabass Spark Shad, just a 3-inch little swim bait on a 1/4 ounce ball head, and that spotted bass crushed it. That is a nice one. That's what I'm talking about. Probably 1.75 pound spotted bass. Let's get that guy back down there and get another one. But basically what I saw was there was a lot of fish suspended on my front Fishfinder in about 15 feet of water. And I was throwing a jig down there, wasn't really getting the bites. I was throwing a drop shot down there, couldn't get the bites. And then I was also throwing this hair jig, which I showed at the beginning. And this is actually a really cool hair jig by Jewel Baits, which actually has a weed guard on it, which is great for these standing trees. Problem is, I think this jig is a little bit too big for those spotted bass to get in their mouth. A lot of times you need like a 2 or 3 pound fish to really eat that jig. And so I got 2 or 3 bites on it, but they wouldn't commit. And so what I decided to do was go to that little bit smaller swim bait, and that hair jig was kind of targeting the suspended fish. And so I thought, well, if I can get something else down there that's kind of in that same water column, 15 to 20 feet, going after the suspended fish like the swim bait, I might be able to get some more fish. That's exactly what happened. I got 2 bites on that cast, and actually had my other spot over there where I got a couple bites, didn't catch any, and I'm about to head right back over there after I hopefully catch a limit here and keep throwing the swim bait. Maybe this is going to be the deal today, just throwing that little bit smaller finessey bait, especially given how cold it is, kind of post front, slick calm. Could be the deal. That's what I'm talking about, guys. Got him. Another one. Doesn't feel as good as the last one. Oh, it popped off. Come on, fish. Dang it. That was another one right there. Shoot. Don't know how that one came off. Oh, man. Oh, man, that sucks. These fish are biting a little bit weird today. But again, just throwing that little 3-inch swim bait. It's really, really light with a little 1/4 ounce head. So I'm actually throwing this on a spinning rod. And I'm throwing it on 6-pound test. And all I'm trying to do is just fire that thing out as far as I can, get away from the boat. I'm actually throwing a 7'2" medium light action spinning rod to get a little bit extra casting distance. And then I'm letting that thing sink down for 15 seconds. With that jig head, I kind of checked the fall rate on it, and it'll fall at 1 foot per second. And so I want to let that thing sink for 15 seconds. Then I'm just barely turning that reel handle and working that bait back in. And I'm just trying to keep that bait right in front of those fish. And every once in a while I might kind of twitch my rod to give it a little bit extra action. But other than that, it's just a very slow retrieve. And you just gotta keep that bait down there. Can you come off? Crap, misses again. What is going on? These fish are hammering it down there. I cannot get them to commit though. I think the conditions are just tough right now, but again, literally exactly what I just talked about. Fire that thing out there, let that thing sink down 15 seconds because the fish are suspended in 15 feet, and then just slowly crawl that bait in. Okay, so I only got 1 fish off that spot, lost another one, and a lot of times when you lose a fish on the spot, guys, it'll actually spook the school and get them a little bit messed up. So I'm just gonna let these fish rest for a little bit. I'll come back a little bit later, and I'm also hoping the sun being up will actually get these fish to lock down a little bit better, and maybe I can catch some fish on a drop shot and a jig like I was planning. But for now, I'm gonna run with that swim bait while these fish are still kind of suspended, and hopefully put a few more fish in the boat. So after catching my first keeper on that main lake point and losing another one, I felt like I had a pretty good pattern going. And so I started running more main lake points in that 15 to 40 foot depth range. And I actually ran 3 or 4 more points and didn't get a single bite. And this happens a lot of times when you're fishing. You might find that the pattern maybe was only working for the first couple hours in the morning, or maybe the conditions changed and those fish just stopped biting. And I did manage to roll over to one of the points where I started the day, and I caught one little one on a drop shot, nothing crazy. And so after all that, I'm like, I'm not really sure if this is the pattern or the deal for today. Okay guys, so I'm at a dilemma here. I've been fishing for an hour and 20 minutes, and I have that one good spy bass in the boat, that one short, and then lost one and had some other bites. And so I feel like I can catch some fish out here out deep, and I feel like I could probably run that the rest of the day and catch some good fish. Problem is that I am not getting the size really out here offshore. It seems like it's a lot of the smaller spotted bass, and I know there's some big smallmouth around, some big largemouth. So I'm kind of trying to figure out, should I abandon the offshore spot stuff just because I know I'm gonna catch smaller fish and try to kind of swing for the fences and go for the bigger fish, or should I just try to get my limit in the boat? And so I'm kind of leaning towards trying to catch the bigger fish, just because at this point I know I probably could go catch a limit if I just, you know, spent the time graphing around a little bit more, throwing that swim bait, throwing a drop shot. But I kind of want to go for some of the bigger fish just for you guys, and you know, if I suck and I fail, then I guess that's the way it goes. But I'm going to probably just bounce a couple of these areas over and over again just to check them, to make sure that there aren't fish pulled up. But basically what I want to do is just run to a new part of the lake, pick up a crankbait, pick up a jig, and try to go for some bigger fish. I don't know if that'll work, but let's see. And I'm going to check a couple more spots before I do that, and hopefully we'll get on some bigger fish. So basically, guys, I decided to swing for the fence and try to catch some bigger fish. And normally on Table Rock, what that means is going shallow with either a jig or a crankbait, maybe a spinnerbait. And so I started running some obvious main lake areas where you had a main lake point that had some nice chunk rock on it, maybe the first thirds of some of the creeks, and a lot of these wind-blown banks, because we got about a 5-6 mile an hour wind starting up in the afternoon. And really, I just tried to spend about an hour establishing a pattern, putting something together. And that actually turned out to be a mistake, because I had established a pattern already and spent my practice time graphing around and figuring out that there were some fish offshore. And then I kind of threw a wrench into my day, tried to do something completely different, and it did not work out. I caught one little tiny bass. But this is super common and a common mistake among fishermen, even myself. We don't listen to the fish. We try to be heroes and go after bigger fish, even though we already have a good pattern found. And we'll actually decide to come back at the very end of the day here and try to fish offshore, and you'll see what happened. Mistakes were made. Got him. There we go. Stay on fish. Oh man. So it looks like I may have messed up, guys. There's a nice spotted bass right there. Just finished up fishing up shallow, fishing the other side of the lake, and I had about 10 minutes left in my day, so I decided to come back to where I started out the day to see if I could get one more fish in the boat. And I mean, this is my second cast on this spot since I got here, and got a nice keeper spotted bass right there, just on a little swim bait again. And so definitely seems like in these 3-hour challenge videos, it's definitely better to stay offshore if I want to try to catch 5 fish. For whatever reason, I struggle to find them quickly when I'm catching them up shallow. Let me put this guy back real quick just to make sure he's all right. There we go. But either way, so it definitely seems like it's better to try to fish offshore rather than try to beat the bank, just because it's a lot more efficient and a lot easier to find fish, especially on these deep clear lakes, by using my electronics rather than having to make a bunch of casts. And so going forward on these 3-hour challenges, I think I'm going to spend the majority of my challenges fishing offshore, trying to find fish away from the bank, just because if I can find them, normally I can put multiple fish in the boat pretty quickly. Where if I'm fishing up shallow, it may take me a while to find them first, and then I might only get a bite every 30 minutes, maybe every hour, which just isn't enough for these 3-hour challenge videos to put 5 in the boat. So today was definitely a great learning experience for me, and this whole 3-hour challenge series has actually taught me a lot already. And if I look back at the 4 challenges I've done so far, it's interesting that every challenge where I split time between fishing offshore and fishing shallow, I did not catch 5 fish, didn't get my limit. And then the one video where I focused offshore for almost the entire video until I got my limit, I actually succeeded and caught my limit. And then I went shallow at the end of the day to try to catch one good kicker, which I did. And so it seems like for me, at least in the lakes in my area, I can definitely be more successful at catching the numbers by fishing offshore and focusing there the majority of the time. And then after that, I can go up shallow and try to catch a kicker. But if I try to fish shallow and deep and mix them all together within the 3-hour time limit, it's definitely not going to produce the numbers of fish, and actually causes me to do worse than it does when I just focus on one or the other. And so going forward, I want to experiment with this whole idea and maybe do a 3-hour challenge where I can only fish offshore, then do a 3-hour challenge where I can only fish up shallow, and see how the results differ. Maybe the size will be different for fishing shallow, maybe I'll catch bigger fish, or maybe I'll find that I actually catch more fish and bigger fish fishing up shallow the whole time. So I'm going to experiment with this in upcoming videos and hope you guys are going to enjoy that. But it's definitely interesting to experiment on the water, challenge yourself in these kind of interesting ways, because you'll learn a lot about yourself as an angler, and you also learn how to adapt under pressure the right way, especially if you're fishing tournaments. And there we go, guys. Time is up. So only ended up getting, let me turn this alarm off so it's not ringing on you guys. There we go, guys. But man, it was a tough day out here today. Only managed to put 2 keeper bass in the boat in the 3-hour challenge. Both came on the swim bait. I did miss 1 fish on the swim bait and some on that hair jig. And I think if I had fished the swim bait in the deep trees all 3 hours, I would put a limit in the boat, no problem. But definitely was more fun swinging for the fences and trying something new. And it didn't pay off, but you know, that's fishing. So hope you guys enjoyed this video anyways. Hope you learned a little bit about how to fish a swim bait and a hair jig in deep trees in the fall and winter time on these deep clear lakes. I'm making a lot more of these 3-hour challenge videos, so you'll be able to see how I make my adjustments, things I try. I'll be doing them on a lot of different lakes, so hopefully you guys will enjoy those videos. I'm also going to be trying to put up as many videos as I can, hopefully 5 or 6 videos a week in November. And so keep checking back to the channel. Hit subscribe if you haven't already to the channel, and also hit the little bell down there. It'll turn on notifications so you'll know when all of my new videos come up. And so thanks again for checking out this video, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.